Today on the Middle Ground, with prison populations rising, Oklahoma's tough on crime. But is it smart on crime? Plus, we're just weeks away from the end of the session. Will there be a budget showdown? We'll tackle this and more right here on the Middle Ground. Oklahomans need their voice in the public policy conversation. Every discussion about public policy solutions right now is Washington-centric. So the Middle Ground focuses on shifting the conversation back here to the heartland and what the people of Oklahoma think about their lives and their future. The status quo is failing. Regardless of what your beliefs are, the status quo isn't working. Well, that's a middle ground. That is the middle concept that we can all agree on. From the middle, we can come and find those solutions together that empower our people and create opportunity for all. Good morning, Oklahoma, and welcome to the Middle Ground. I'm your host, Michael Carnuccio, joined as I am each week by Trent England, the host of MiddleGround Radio, which you can catch weekday morning, from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on 1640 a.m. That channel is known as the Eagle. Trent, it's been a pretty active week on the national level. We're going to talk quite a bit about state politics here a little bit later, but let's start with the national picture. The presidential race is heating up.
Well, that's right. Starting really a week ago Friday with Bernie Sanders getting into the race on the Democratic side, finally giving Hillary a little bit of competition, although I think not a lot of people taking Vermont's independent socialist senator all that seriously in the race, but looks like Martin O'Malley might also get in on the Democratic side. He made some comments this week that suggest he is looking at actually doing that, jumping into the race. Former mayor of Baltimore. So a lot of questions about whether those issues are going to hamper him or help him. And then on the Republican side, former Arkansas Governor Huckabee, Carly Fiorina, a former high-power corporate CEO with very little political experience, trying to use that as an asset. And then, of course, Ben Carson, a physician, no political experience really, jumping into the race.
So let's break what this all down, and for our viewers what this means. Let's start back at where you started, the Democratic side of the ticket, and looking at Martin O'Malley. Of course, you mentioned former mayor of Baltimore, also two-term governor with the state of Maryland. There afterwards, plays in a rock band, right? He's young, Irish Catholic, raises a lot of money, pretty big on the northeastern side. Is he really the competitor to Hillary Clinton? Is he really looking at stepping in and seeing if he can be the alternative?
He could be. I mean, there are a lot of questions about how strong the Hillary Clinton machine is, and whether what Democrats are looking for is really an alternative to Hillary or a foil for Hillary to make sure that she goes into the real election contest next year strong. I mean, frankly, for a lot of parties, like the Democratic Party in Iowa, a lot of state-based political parties, they want a contest because they raise money off of it, and so Iowa Democrats, they're the big winners no matter what by having a legitimate race. Hearing from some sources in Washington D.C., there's a lot of concern on the Democratic side about blowback. The Clinton machine remains a powerful political machine. I think one of the big questions is, would the Obama machine get behind somebody else, maybe O'Malley? That's possible, but he has some baggage from Baltimore. There was kind of a chorus of voices after the Baltimore riots laying blame at O'Malley's doorstep. So I think it's an open question with him.
So let's move to the Republican side then of where the ticket will line up. And Governor Huckabee, Mike Huckabee, formerly of Arkansas governorship, I should say, and then with Fox News and stepped away from his role there, has a pretty big pack. He was formidable in 2008, sat out 2012. What's he going to be like in this race?
Well, he is probably, of anyone on the Republican side, with maybe maybe accepting Marco Rubio, Governor Huckabee's a great talker. I mean, he's probably the best speech maker. He's a former pastor, and that's to be expected. And he has a group of, or a constituency, I should say, among some social conservatives. On the other hand, he's alienated some fiscal conservatives in the past. And so I think a lot of it depends on what issues the most important to a lot of Republican primary voters. There are always questions about people in the media, which is where he is right now, whether they throw their name out there to kind of raise their profile, I think people have those kind of questions about him. So we'll see with Governor Huckabee.
We talked early on, and Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, was the early favorite in straw polls in Iowa. Then we saw Ted Cruz make a little bit of a surge. Marco Rubio seems to be the hot ticket in the name right now. And of course, we still haven't heard from former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, who seems to be raising a lot of money but hasn't done anything really public just yet. Is Rubio, does he have staying power, or is he just the next fresh face?
Well, the media loves to report the horse race aspect of this, and we do see bumps up and down in the polls, but a lot of these are people moving from 10 to 16% or from 14 to 18%. Right now, voters aren't committed on the very, very small groups of voters on the Republican side at least are committed to anybody. And so we'll see a lot of that movement, people moving around. And what it really comes down to, I think, is the early states. You have Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and how well candidates are really getting some depth in those states, not just breadth.
So let's talk about that element, because I think that's where this all comes together for both parties. Is you have a primary system. So about a minute left here in this segment. How does Iowa, then New Hampshire, how does that schedule fit into maybe favoring one candidate or type?
Well, New Hampshire obviously is, it's a northeast state. It tends to be a swing state, a little bit, seems to tip toward maybe more moderate or at least non-traditional candidates. And, it's hard to say, I think, of the field right now, who is going to have a leg up in New Hampshire. Iowa tends to be, for Republicans at least, socially conservative and tends to favor those kind of candidates. And so, I think that's where a Huckabee sees a big opportunity in Iowa. And that traditionally has been the case, although doesn't always ripple that far, into the primary schedule.
Well, that's the national picture. When we come back, let's bring it local and talk about the state of Oklahoma. But folks, we need to take a quick break. But that budget's a hot topic at your state capitol. And up next, we're going to discuss several big budget busters that should be cut. Stay with us.
What is hope? You cannot see it nor hear it. And though you can't touch it, you can feel it. You feel it when your heart is full and spirit strong. You know when hope is present, and you certainly feel it when it is gone. The original meaning of hope was synonymous with trust, a promise, a confidence, even salvation. Central Oklahoma Habitat for Humanity has been providing this type of hope to our community for nearly 3 decades. And just like the homes we've built, repaired, and rebuilt, our hope gives families joy and peace, protection, strength, courage, and comfort. It gives them endurance, warmth, and confidence they so desperately needed. If you are searching for hope or wanting to provide hope for those in such a need, please contact us, Central Oklahoma Habitat for Humanity, building houses, building hope.
We have a vision of Oklahoma that in the 21st century, you and I can be living in a daily land run where freedom just seems to seep out of the ground, where free enterprise creates opportunity for everyone at all levels of society. That is the type of Oklahoma that we were founded on. That's what this state was created upon, and that's where we see our future. OCPA is founded on the philosophy that free markets, individual liberty, individual initiative, and personal responsibility are what build safe, sustainable societies. It's what empowers people. Anyone, no matter what their hopes or their dreams are, should care about the success of OCPA, because as we breed excellence, as we succeed, what we're doing is ensuring that they have every opportunity available to them at their fingertips, and that no matter how big their dream, they can achieve it, because we're going to clear that pathway for them. Welcome back, folks. Joining us now in studio is Jonathan Small, the Executive Vice President of OCPA. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Good to be here.
Jonathan, let's start off talking about corrections reform. It's an issue we hear the governor talk about all the time. We've actually heard the speaker talk about it some this year. It's been an issue the last couple of years that Oklahomans are hearing about. Where do things stand in the last month of session?
Well, it's very interesting. Oklahoma is actually now becoming a place where corrections reform measures are gaining popularity. We've seen a number of bills, somewhere almost 10 bills that likely could be signed and enacted into law by November of 2015 that'll really help to limit the number of people that are put in prison as it relates to nonviolent offenders. House Bill 2168, it's a measure that has been supported by people from both sides of the aisle, if you will, which really looks at our state licensing structure, and it says, okay, for these nonviolent, mostly drug offenses, is it really in the best interest of the public to prevent those ex-offenders from being able to get work as a barber or someone that's doing surveying? And the good thing is that legislation passed with overwhelming support. So there's around 13 licenses or so now that ex-offenders will now be able to get based on the hard work of lawmakers at the Capitol.
Well, and I know the Oklahoman earlier this week had a major story about these nonviolent offenders who have gone away for life on the three strikes law, and that looks like it may change this year as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's an example of another one that probably have been brought up 10 years ago. You would have been laughed out of the building, but actually looking at kind of a very ridiculous policy that the state had, where for drug trafficking or drug possession there was a possibility to get life without parole. Obviously that's not in the best interest of taxpayers or the person that happens to be imprisoned or their families, and so we're seeing movement on that as well. Another major piece that will allow judges to have more discretion in sentencing is House Bill 1518 by Representative Pam Peterson, and then was also authored by Senator Shaw. It really is going to allow the entire system to have a better look at someone before they enter prison that's a nonviolent offender.
You mentioned taxpayers in this, and I imagine it is the fact that there's a budget hole this year that is causing this issue of criminal justice or public safety to be looked at from a budgetary standpoint, and what kind of reforms can be made. Is that really the big emphasis here, or is it that the governor's just been talking about this for so long, this happens to be the year it gets traction?
I think the good thing is that part of this is motivated by good policy interests, that it's good policy to be smart on crime, not just tough on crime. So I think that's the number one driving factor. Second, though, definitely is the budget pressure. We're now spending almost $1 billion on corrections policy in Oklahoma. And when you consider that Oklahomans generally are not in favor of having their taxes increased to expand government, government needs to look at ways to be smarter about how it spends tax dollars. And so that's why you're seeing corrections reform also having an opportunity this year.
It seems like people have finally realized, I mean, you hear these statistics and they're jarring. Oklahoma locks up a greater percentage of our female population than any other state. I think we're second for just the percentage of the general population in prison. But it seems pretty alarming. So your sense is legislators actually they're kind of awake to the humanitarian issue here?
No, they most definitely are. When you look at it in Oklahoma, since the 80s, the prison population has increased by more than 400%. So it's definitely not an issue where Oklahomans are that much more evil than they were a few decades ago. It's definitely that, unfortunately, government has been expanded so much, and there hasn't been a focus on protecting Oklahomans from dangerous people, which is where our corrections policy should really be focused.
Jonathan, you've made recommendations to the legislature, you do every year, on where they can find savings in the budget, and I want to walk through a couple of those with you. Folks can find this information at facebook.com/MiddleGround TV, or I understand your website is ocpathink.org,
yes,
where they
correct.
can get your list as well. How did you put this list together? What is your background and experience? How do you understand how state government works?
Well, I had the privilege of beginning to work in state government in 2003, which was during a recession at that time as well for the state. We had seen the national economy slowing down, and it had resulted in a ripple effect in Oklahoma. And I began working under Governor Brad Henry and Scott Meacham at that time in their budget office. And we began to look at the budget to see what the state could do to really use taxpayer dollars in a better manner. And so over the last 10 years or so, I've been working in government-related finance and really getting an understanding of what government does well, what it should continue doing, and some things that it should stop doing, like attempts at space travel. Your listeners may be surprised, and viewers may be surprised to know that Oklahoma actually is continuing to operate a spaceport that has yet to launch anyone to space. And I say that seriously. The state of Oklahoma has spent almost $10 million over the last decade at attempts at space travel.
They just watch a lot of movies, maybe in the legislature. I mean, that really is fascinating that, you know, you hear people talk as if everything that they spend money on is a core function of government. Are there, I mean, you have other examples of things like that? That just seems really out of this world.
Oh, most definitely. You know, to his credit, the Secretary of Finance and Revenue, Preston Dorflinger, pointed out that state agencies now are spending close to $40 million on memberships and also what's known as swag advertisements. One only has to look at the newspaper to see the number of state agencies that are advertising at very large sporting events or pro sporting events. There's definitely places to cut, whether it's spending on roping contests, aquariums, attempts at space travel, losses on golf courses, or inefficient healthcare programs. There's definitely other places where the state could save money without having to hurt core services like education and transportation.
Let's take a break right there and come back and really talk about the numbers there and what that could look like for the state and how big that budget hole is. But we're going to take a quick break right now. Session's winding down, but there's still a few bold reform ideas on the horizon. We'll discuss those when we return. Stay tuned.
A well's output is only as strong as landing the production stream. In extreme conditions, call for extreme durability. At Syntec, our engineers understand what matters. That's why we craft centralizers differently than anyone else in the industry. Laser cut from a single piece of special steel alloy and featuring an innovative heat-treated stop collar. Syntec centralizers create optimum standoff and flexibility for enhanced cementation in any conditions. It's simply smarter. No welding, no weak points. That means minimum torque, greater strength, and superior drag reduction. From lateral shale operations on land to ultra-deep water, you only have to buy it once. No fishing, no failures, no BS. Our best-in-class centralizers outperform the competition on any rig and any challenge. And we've got customizable simulations to prove it. We know that downtime isn't an option, and we take pride in providing our customers a world-class product with world-class service and support, made in the USA. Others still try to imitate it, but none can replicate it. Not even close. There's only one centralizer this strong. Syntec Centralizers, an international symbol of quality.
They didn't see that she was normal, but different. They just seen her with a disability.
The foundation of it is to provide a choice to those parents who know best for their children of what would be the best educational environment for them.
They are way behind at the start of the race. This is just helping them catch up a little bit.
They saw our children and how well they're doing, that they'd understand why this is important.
Welcome back, folks. We're visiting today with Jonathan Small, the Executive Vice President for the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs, and we're going through his blue sheet, his cut list that the state is looking at on budget items. I understand the state is facing a $611 million hole this year going into their appropriation for next year. Some of your recommendations that folks can find, you can find the sheet at facebook.com/MiddleGround TV. Some of your top recommendations here, I understand, are already going through state employee health insurance reform and some incentives for the Medicaid program. Why don't you talk about those?
No, that's exactly right. You know, one of the things that we know from looking at the state budget is our largest growing item has been in health care. Right now, the Medicaid program has increased almost 170% over the last decade, and then the health care program is around 100% for state and education employees. That's eating away at a lot of the extra money that lawmakers have. Lawmakers, to their credit, have now given the governor's office and her budget leaders the ability now to better function the state's healthcare program, and by incentivizing state and education employees to go to providers that offer better service at a better price, it would save the state, once fully implemented, almost $78 million a year. So those are real hard numbers that can be saved. The other thing is we saw a great victory on Medicaid reform, finally trying to tackle our state's Medicaid budget, which is now more than what we spend on common education and higher education combined, and really making that program work better so that it saves taxpayer money, but then also transitions patients to where they can eventually be in a place to work and care for themselves. That in itself, if it's fully implemented, can save the state over $80 million a year. So those are some real hard numbers that can be saved if the legislature gets after it.
And that combined, excuse me, is that you just mentioned $155 million out of that 611 right there for two reforms. Exactly. What else is there?
Well, those are long-term. I think it's great to emphasize to people, those are long-term. Every single year the state saves $150 million, right? So there are other things like that on your list?
No, that's right. There's also some other things. We have seen a massive growth, other than healthcare. In higher education, we have seen a significant growth in higher education. You know, the viewers, I'm sure they don't have to be reminded if they've got college students. OU has increased tuition and fees 150% over the last decade. Even though legislative appropriations have kept pace with inflation, OSU has increased tuition and fees almost 148%. And a recent study found that at OU and OSU, 20% of the professors are doing between 55 and 60% of the teaching. So that means a lot of the faculty and administrative growth in higher education is not resulting in more students being taught. It's actually resulting in more bloat. If that was eliminated and you actually encourage professors to teach, you could save the state over $216 million a year. And per year that could be saved. So those three items alone take care of more than half of the state's shortfall.
You have an item on here that caught my eye that I thought was interesting. You say eliminate swag, advertising, and memberships for state agencies, which over 3 years could total $120 million savings to the state. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of the state agencies become members of organizations that actually promote an increased use of taxpayer dollars. For instance, NCSL. The NCSL was lobbying for the stimulus package, was lobbying for the Medicaid expansion, which, as you know, a number of states have decided not to participate in that, but yet taxpayers are required to pay dues to these organizations that are actually going against the interests of their elected leaders. But it's not just that. If you've actually had the privilege of watching a Thunder game, you will notice that a number of state agencies are advertising either at halftime or in the newspaper and large printouts. Those are all the kinds of things that we're seeing at the state level, which is really a testament to things really aren't that bad when you have those kinds of extras.
Well, and you've worked inside government here. I mean, what is it that makes a government agency think it's a good idea to spend tax dollars on advertising during a Thunder? That just seems like such a strange idea, I think, from a taxpayer perspective.
Well, I think if they're wanting to promote their issue, if their goal is to get more people enrolled on a program or advertise what they're doing, then they want to be where they think more eyes are seen. This is one of the reasons why the Medicaid program growth exploded, because Medicaid officials were excited about signing more people up on Medicaid. And one of the other reforms that needs to be implemented is actually going back and seeing if people are still eligible once they've signed up.
I'm somewhat fascinated by the audacity of this, that you could have Oklahoma taxpayers that are not able to have tickets or actually go to a game because their tax dollars that they're being taxed for coming out of their pocket are paying for an agency to be able to advertise and have a suite or have tickets at a game. We've got about a minute left here, Jonathan. I've got to ask you, because you mentioned losses on golf courses. It looks like that's about $270,000 a year. What are some of the other, just rapid fire here before we go out, some other things that pop to your mind?
Well, one of the things the federal government, rarely ever do we look to the federal government for guidance, but they long ago realized that they could not operate the number of parks that they had. So a number of years ago, they began to shift over to private partnerships where they would enter into a private contractor to run that park. Back in the mid-2000s, when we looked at this under a Democratic control, we looked at the need to really restructure Oklahoma's park system. We had too many parks. Many of our state parks were really a kickback for a lawmaker for that area they were from. And really having a tiered system where we have a high priority on a few parks that have historic interests, and then letting local communities step up and control. To her credit, Debbie Snodgrass began to implement this a couple of years ago and released 7 parks back to local governments, and it was very successful. And so that's something that needs to happen and could save millions.
Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. Good luck the rest of session.
Thank you.
Folks, we'll be right back with the final word after this.
Yeah, the Liberty Foundation's job is to essentially shape the debate in states, and we do that by going into the states and making sure that we talk with local groups about how to talk about the jobs issue, how to frame the debate on the jobs issue, so that way it's connecting with American citizens in a way that is pro-free market.
And we can really lead on these issues to try to marry the needs of business, who need talent if they're going to keep the jobs in America, with the needs of the individual who needs those skills if they want to elevate their ability to earn and live their version of the American dream.
So a competitive federalism and a really understanding how competition is healthy for the people in creating liberty and freedom for everyone. I think that in a macro sense is our greatest challenge going forward.
I faced numerous challenges. Me and both of my children were homeless.
Positive Tomorrows is Oklahoma's only elementary school serving homeless children, and we serve students that are in grades kindergarten through 5th grade.
We're a temporary solution to help families who are going through difficult times.
Give parents in poverty the opportunity to send their child to a different school other than their neighborhood public school by giving them a savings account that would allow them to make some choices based on what their child needs.
There's so much potential in our school, and the ESA laws would completely just allow us to tap into that potential.
And that's all we want for our kids, is to know that there's something beyond this. They're not their situation.
Welcome back, folks. Well, Trent, exciting conversation today, but there's going to be some more exciting discussion coming up later next week, I understand that you're part of.
That's right. Coming up on Tuesday, we are going to have a debate on privacy versus transparency in the First Amendment, and whether the First Amendment protects a person, particularly when they're donating to nonprofits or political causes. Does the First Amendment protect your right to remain anonymous, to remain silent when you're involved in politics? I think it'll be a great discussion. It's at the Oklahoma History Center, just across the street from the Oklahoma State Capitol, Tuesday, 11:30. OCPAthink.org is a website where you can register for that. I'll be one of 4 panelists. It should be really interesting, I think.
Folks, you can hear Trent talk about that program and get more information on the debate on your radio program at 7 to 9 a.m. every morning during the week. 1640 a.m. is the station, right? MiddleGround Radio.
MiddleGround Radio.
And folks, also want to talk to you about this show that will last through the end of session. We're going to take you through when the legislature finally adjourns, whether they go to special session or not. We're going to be right with you, carrying all the information on what the budget deal is and what it means to you. Then we'll do a wrap-up session and have a show that comes at the end of the legislative process to make sure you understand everything that happened. But until then, make sure you tune in to MiddleGround at MiddleGround TV or facebook.com/MiddleGround TV. That's all the time we have for today. We'll see you next Sunday morning right here on the Middle Ground, Fox 25, 8:30 a.m. Make it a great week, work hard, and have fun, Oklahoma.